In the golden glow of Windsor Castle's grand drawing room, millions of viewers around the world settled in to watch what they thought would be another traditional Christmas message from their new king. Little did they know that hidden within the carefully chosen decorations, the deliberate placement of family photographs, and even the specific words chosen by King Charles III lay a deeply personal tribute that would reveal the true heart of a monarch still learning to balance duty with devotion. What appeared to be a standard royal Christmas address was actually an intricate tapestry of subtle gestures, meaningful symbols, and carefully crafted moments that told the story of a king's quiet determination to honor a beloved daughter-in-law who had faced the unthinkable with grace. As viewers watched, most missed the profound homage unfolding before their eyes, a testament to how even royalty finds ways to show love when protocol demands restraint. This is the story of how King Charles III transformed his fourth Christmas address into something far more powerful than anyone expected, a masterpiece of royal discretion that spoke volumes without saying a word, proving that sometimes the most meaningful tributes are the ones hidden in plain sight. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Buckingham Palace as King Charles III sat in his private study, a leather-bound folder containing the draft of his upcoming Christmas address resting on the mahogany desk before him. It was November 2024, and the weight of his fourth Christmas message as monarch felt different from the previous three. This year had tested the royal family in ways that even decades of public scrutiny hadn't prepared them for. Charles adjusted his reading glasses and picked up his fountain pen, the same one his mother had given him years ago. The initial draft, prepared by his communications team, lay before him marked with his careful annotations. But something was missing. As he read through the formal language about unity, hope, and national resilience, his thoughts drifted to Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and the remarkable courage she had shown throughout her cancer diagnosis and treatment. The king's relationship with his daughter-in-law had always been one of mutual respect and growing affection. From the moment William had first brought Catherine home to meet the family, Charles had recognized something special in the young woman who would one day be queen consort. She possessed a natural grace that couldn't be taught, a genuine warmth that drew people to her, and, most importantly, an unwavering dedication to the institution of monarchy that matched his own. But this year had been different. When Catherine's cancer diagnosis became public in March, the entire royal family had rallied around her and William. Charles, who was simultaneously dealing with his own cancer diagnosis, found himself in the unique position of understanding exactly what his daughter-in-law was experiencing. The fear, the uncertainty, the weight of carrying on public duties while fighting a private battle, he knew it all intimately. During those difficult months, Charles had watched Catherine handle her situation with a dignity that reminded him of his own mother. Even when she stepped back from public engagements for her treatment, she never complained, never sought sympathy, and never let the burden show publicly. When she did appear, whether at Trooping the Colour or Wimbledon, she radiated the same warmth and commitment that had endeared her to the British people. The king remembered a particularly poignant moment from earlier in the year. He had been visiting Catherine and William at their Windsor home, ostensibly to discuss some charitable patronage matters. But, really, he had come as a father-in-law concerned about his family. Catherine had been in the garden with the children, and, despite the fact that she was midway through her chemotherapy treatment, she was laughing as she helped Prince George perfect his cricket bowling technique while Princess Charlotte attempted to teach little Prince Louis how to properly hold a cricket bat. Watching from the window, Charles had been struck by the normalcy of the scene. Here was a woman facing one of life's greatest challenges, yet she was still being a mother, still creating those precious everyday moments that children remember forever. It was then that he truly understood the depth of Catherine's character. She wasn't just performing royal duties or maintaining appearances, she was living authentically, finding joy and purpose even in the midst of personal struggle. That evening, over dinner, Catherine had asked Charles about his own treatment, not in a way that sought sympathy or comparison, but with genuine concern for his well-being. They had talked openly about the strange surreal quality of continuing royal duties while undergoing cancer treatment, the way photographers tried to read meaning into every public appearance, and the challenge of maintaining privacy while living such public lives. Charles had shared stories of his mother's approach to personal challenges, how Queen Elizabeth II had taught him that duty and personal resilience were intertwined. Catherine had listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about how the late Queen had balanced the demands of monarchy with the needs of family. It was clear to Charles that Catherine wasn't just interested in royal protocol, she was trying to understand how to be authentic while fulfilling the extraordinary responsibilities that came with her position. As autumn progressed and Catherine gradually returned to her public duties, Charles watched with admiration as she seemed to have found an even deeper connection with the people she served. Her first major appearance after completing her treatment was at the Festival of Remembrance, and Charles noticed how differently people responded to her. There was a new depth to the respect and affection shown by veterans, families, and dignitaries alike. Catherine's experience had somehow made her more relatable, more human, while simultaneously demonstrating the kind of quiet strength that the monarchy needed. The king began to understand that Catherine's journey through cancer hadn't just been a personal battle, it had been a masterclass in modern royal leadership. She had shown that vulnerability and strength weren't mutually exclusive, that it was possible to be both human and royal, that personal struggle could actually deepen one's capacity to serve others. Now, as Charles sat with his Christmas address draft, he knew he wanted to acknowledge what Catherine had shown the nation without being obvious about it. Royal protocol meant he couldn't simply dedicate his speech to her or speak directly about her health journey. But he could craft a message that embodied the values she had demonstrated, that celebrated the kind of resilience and grace she had shown. He began to make notes in the margins of his draft. Instead of generic references to national challenges, he would speak about finding light in darkness. Rather than abstract notions of service, he would talk about the power of quiet strength and everyday heroism. The themes would be universal, but those who knew the royal family well would understand the deeper inspiration behind his words. Charles also began thinking about the visual elements of his address. Every detail of a royal Christmas message was scrutinized by millions of viewers around the world. The location, the decorations, the photographs displayed in the background, all of it sent messages. This year, he wanted those visual elements to tell a story of family support, resilience, and the continuing strength of the monarchy's next generation. The king called his private secretary and asked for a meeting with the communications team. He had some significant changes to make to his Christmas message, changes that would require careful planning and thoughtful execution. This wouldn't be a typical royal address. This would be something more personal, more meaningful, and infinitely more challenging to create. As evening fell over Buckingham Palace, Charles continued working on his revisions. Outside, London was beginning its transformation into the magical city that Christmas always brought, with lights beginning to twinkle in shop windows and the first Christmas markets opening in the squares and parks. But, inside the palace, the king was focused on crafting something that would capture the spirit of a year that had tested his family's strength and revealed their character. He thought about Catherine's children and how they had handled their mother's illness with the same dignity she had shown. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis had continued with their school activities and royal appearances when required, always seeming happy and well-adjusted despite the private concerns they must have carried. Their resilience was another testament to Catherine's strength as a mother and William's steadiness as a father. The king also reflected on how Catherine's experience had brought the family closer together. There had been more private family gatherings, more informal check-ins, more moments of genuine connection between family members who often communicated primarily through official channels and scheduled meetings. Catherine's illness had reminded all of them that beneath the titles and the protocol, they were simply people who cared about each other. As Charles worked late into the night, refining his message and planning how to weave Catherine's influence throughout his address without making it obvious, he felt a deep sense of purpose. This Christmas message would be his most personal yet, a tribute to the quiet heroes in his own family and in families across the Commonwealth who faced challenges with grace and emerged stronger. The Royal Collection Trust's storage vaults beneath Windsor Castle held treasures spanning centuries of British royal history. In early December 2024, King Charles III found himself in the unusual position of personally selecting items for his Christmas address backdrop, a task typically delegated to palace staff and communications specialists. But this year was different. Every element needed to tell a specific story. Charles walked slowly through the climate-controlled corridors, his footsteps echoing off the stone walls as he examined paintings, photographs, and decorative objects that could serve his subtle purpose. With him was Sarah, the palace's head curator, who had worked with the royal family for over 2 decades and understood the delicate balance between tradition and innovation that marked the modern monarchy. They stopped before a particular section containing family photographs from recent years. Charles picked up a silver-framed image from Catherine and William's wedding day, studying it carefully. In the photograph, Catherine was radiant in her Sarah Burton for Alexander McQueen gown, but what caught Charles's attention was the expression in her eyes, a mixture of joy, determination, and what he now recognized as the quiet strength that would carry her through the challenges ahead. "This one," he said quietly, handing the frame to Sarah. "But not prominently displayed. I want it visible but not obvious." Sarah made a note on her tablet. She had worked on countless royal broadcasts and understood the intricate choreography involved in creating the perfect backdrop. Every item had to appear naturally placed while actually being positioned with military precision. The challenge this year was that the king seemed to be telling a very specific story through his choices. They moved to another section where more recent family photographs were stored. Charles paused at an image taken during the summer at Balmoral, showing Catherine with her 3 children during one of their Highland walks. In the photo, she was helping Prince Louis climb over a stone wall while Prince George and Princess Charlotte laughed at something off camera. It had been taken just weeks before her cancer diagnosis became public, and Charles remembered how normal everything had seemed that day. "The children need to be represented," Charles said, though he didn't elaborate on why this particular image resonated with him. Sarah nodded and added it to their growing selection. The king's approach was becoming clear to Sarah. Rather than the usual mix of official royal portraits and Commonwealth memorabilia that typically adorned Christmas address backdrops, this year's selection seemed deeply personal. Each item appeared to tell part of a larger narrative about family, resilience, and the continuity of the monarchy through challenging times. They spent over an hour selecting items, with Charles occasionally picking up objects and then setting them aside after thoughtful consideration. A particular crystal vase caught his attention. It had been a gift to Catherine from a children's hospital where she was patron, given to her after a particularly moving visit where she had spent hours with young cancer patients and their families. "Perfect," Charles murmured, examining the way the light caught the crystal's faceted surface. The symbolism was layered. It represented Catherine's charitable work, her connection to families dealing with illness, and the way hope could refract and multiply even in difficult circumstances, much like light through crystal. Meanwhile, at Clarence's house, the king's communications team was working on refining the speech itself. James, the king's principal private secretary, sat with Emma, the head of communications, reviewing the latest draft. They both understood that this year's address was different from previous years, though the king hadn't explicitly explained why. "He's woven themes of quiet resilience throughout," Emma observed, highlighting several passages. "It's more personal than usual, but still appropriately universal." James nodded, noting how Charles had managed to speak about finding strength in unexpected places without ever mentioning specific personal circumstances. The speech talked about those who face private battles with public grace and the everyday heroes who inspire us through their courage. To most listeners, these would seem like inspiring but general observations about human nature. To those who knew the royal family's recent challenges, the meaning would be unmistakable. The next day, Charles met with his media team to discuss the visual presentation of the address. The location would be the White Drawing Room at Windsor Castle, a space that held particular significance for the royal family. It was where Queen Elizabeth II had recorded many of her most memorable Christmas messages, and its elegant proportions and warm lighting created an atmosphere of intimacy despite its grandeur. Charles had specific ideas about how the room should be arranged. The traditional Christmas tree would be positioned as always, but this year he wanted it decorated with ornaments that told a story. Among the usual royal collection of baubles and ribbons, he requested the inclusion of several items that had special meaning: a small crystal angel that had been a gift from Catherine to the late Queen Elizabeth II, and a set of handmade ornaments that Catherine's children had created during her treatment period. The photography team leader, David, listened carefully as Charles described his vision. "I want warmth," the king explained. "Not just the usual formal dignity, but genuine warmth. This year, I want people to see the humanity behind the crown." David understood the challenge. Royal Christmas addresses were traditionally filmed with precise lighting and careful staging to project authority and stability. The king was asking for something that maintained that dignity while adding layers of emotional authenticity. It would require subtle adjustments to lighting, camera angles, and even the king's positioning to achieve the desired effect. The speech's themes were also influencing the selection of background music and transitional elements. The usual fanfares and ceremonial music would be supplemented with gentler, more introspective pieces that supported the message of quiet strength and personal resilience. The musical director spent days selecting pieces that would enhance the emotional undertones without overwhelming them. Charles's attention to detail extended to his wardrobe selection. Rather than his most formal military uniforms or state robes, he chose a navy suit with a tie that had subtle significance. It featured a pattern that incorporated symbols associated with cancer research charities, though the design was so understated that only those familiar with such organizations would recognize it. Even the timing of certain elements was being carefully planned. Charles wanted to deliver specific passages of his speech when the camera would naturally capture certain background elements. A mention of family strength would coincide with a view of the family photographs, while words about hope emerging from difficult times would be spoken as the camera caught the light refracting through the crystal vase. The rehearsals became exercises in precision timing and emotional authenticity. Charles practiced delivering his speech while the camera team worked to capture the subtle visual cues he wanted to include. It was unlike any royal broadcast preparation they had previously undertaken, requiring both technical excellence and deep understanding of the personal story being told through layers of symbolism. Sarah, the curator, worked with the palace's decoration team to ensure that every item in the room supported the overall narrative. The family photographs were positioned at heights and angles where they would be naturally visible without appearing staged. The crystal vase was placed where the afternoon light would create the desired refractory effect. Even the arrangement of books on nearby shelves was considered. Titles about resilience, hope, and British history were subtly displayed. The challenge was making everything appear effortless while ensuring that nothing was left to chance. This was royal communication at its most sophisticated level, where deeper meanings were embedded in every visible detail, yet the overall effect had to seem natural and unforced. As Christmas approached, Charles reviewed every element one final time. The speech captured his intended themes without being obvious. The visual elements told their story through careful symbolism rather than explicit reference. The musical and technical elements supported rather than overwhelmed the personal message he wanted to convey. Standing in the white drawing room during the final rehearsal, surrounded by the carefully chosen items that would frame his address, Charles felt satisfied that he had found a way to honor Catherine's remarkable year while maintaining the dignity and universal appeal expected of a royal Christmas message. The tribute would be there for those who understood how to read the signs, while the speech itself would speak to everyone about the power of quiet courage and the importance of family support during difficult times. This would be more than a Christmas address, it would be a masterpiece of royal communication, showing how even the most formal institutions could find ways to express deep personal meaning while serving their public purpose. The morning of December 20, 2024, dawned crisp and clear at Windsor Castle. King Charles III stood at the window of his private study, watching the frost sparkle on the ancient grounds where his family had gathered for centuries of Christmas celebrations. Today would be the filming of his Christmas address, and he felt the weight of the subtle tribute he was about to deliver to millions of people around the world. Catherine herself was unaware of the king's carefully planned homage. She and William were at Anmer Hall with their children, preparing for their own Christmas traditions. Catherine had been looking forward to this Christmas with particular intensity, her first since completing her cancer treatment, her first where she could fully embrace the joy of the season without the shadow of illness hanging over the family. Charles had spoken to William just 2 days earlier, during one of their regular check-ins that had become more frequent since both their cancer diagnoses. William had mentioned how different Catherine seemed now, how the experience had somehow deepened her already strong commitment to their royal duties while making her even more present and engaged as a mother. She talks about wanting to use this experience to help others, William had told his father. Not in a public way necessarily, but she's been thinking about how her position might allow her to support families going through similar challenges. This conversation had reinforced Charles's decision to weave Catherine's influence throughout his address. She represented everything he wanted to celebrate about quiet heroism, the way ordinary people faced extraordinary challenges with dignity, and how personal struggles could actually strengthen rather than diminish one's capacity to serve others. The filming crew arrived at Windsor Castle in the early afternoon, their equipment carefully transported through the historic corridors to the white drawing room. David, the lead cinematographer, surveyed the space one final time, checking how the winter light fell across the carefully arranged furniture and decorative elements that would frame the king's message. The Christmas tree stood magnificently in its traditional position, but this year its decoration told a story that only the most observant viewers would fully appreciate. Among the traditional royal ornaments were the small crystal angel that Catherine had given to Queen Elizabeth II during her final Christmas, and the handmade decorations that Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis had created during their mother's treatment period. These children's crafts, with their imperfect charm and obvious love, represented hope and normal family life continuing despite difficult circumstances. Charles's dresser helped him into his chosen outfit, the navy suit with the subtly significant tie. The king examined his reflection in the mirror, noting how the choice made him appear more approachable while maintaining appropriate dignity. Everything about this broadcast was walking a careful line between formal royal communication and personal expression. As the crew completed their setup, Charles reviewed his speech one final time. He had memorized most of it, but the margins of his copy were filled with handwritten notes about timing and emphasis. certain phrases needed to be delivered with particular care to convey their deeper meaning without being obvious about it. The speech opened with traditional Christmas greetings and reflection on the year that had passed, but even these conventional elements carried hidden significance. Charles spoke about the year that tested our resilience and revealed our character, words that could apply to the nation's challenges but held special meaning for anyone who knew about the royal family's health struggles. One of the most carefully crafted passages came early in the address, where Charles spoke about those who face private battles with public grace, showing us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the quiet determination to continue serving others even when facing personal challenges. As he delivered these words, the camera angle was precisely positioned to capture the family photograph showing Catherine with her children at Balmoral, the image soft and natural in the background. The lighting team had worked for hours to achieve the perfect effect with the crystal vase. As Charles reached the portion of his speech about hope that refracts and multiplies, creating light even in our darkest moments, the afternoon sun struck the crystal at exactly the right angle, sending rainbow reflections across the nearby wall. The symbolism was powerful but subtle, hope breaking into its component colors, spreading beauty through careful positioning and natural light. Charles had also woven references to family strength throughout the address in ways that celebrated the institution of marriage and parenthood without being specific to his own family's experiences. He spoke about the extraordinary ordinary moments that sustain us, the shared laughter around family dinner tables, the comfort of familiar traditions, the way love grows stronger when tested by difficulty. The passage about children was particularly meaningful. Charles had written about young people who show us that resilience is learned by watching the adults they trust handle challenges with grace, while the camera captured, almost incidentally, the handmade ornaments on the Christmas tree. The visual reminded viewers that children are always watching how the adults in their lives handle difficult situations, and that Catherine's children had learned lessons in courage simply by observing their mother's dignified response to her illness. The king's delivery was masterful, conveying warmth and sincerity while maintaining the gravitas expected of a monarch's Christmas address. His tone was conversational yet authoritative, personal yet universal. He managed to speak from his own experience without making the speech about himself, to honor Catherine's journey without violating her privacy, and to offer inspiration that felt authentic rather than manufactured. The technical aspects of the filming were flawless. The sound team captured not just Charles's voice but the subtle ambient sounds that made the broadcast feel alive, the gentle ticking of the ornate clock in the corner, the soft whisper of wind against the ancient windows, the distant sound of church bells from St. George's Chapel. These audio elements created an atmosphere of peaceful reflection that supported the speech's themes. One of the most sophisticated elements of the tribute was Charles's use of language that echoed themes Catherine had explored in her own public statements during her treatment. When Catherine had spoken publicly about her cancer journey, she had emphasized gratitude, the importance of family support, and the way the experience had deepened her understanding of what truly matters in life. Charles's speech reflected these same themes, but in the context of broader national and Commonwealth experiences. The segment about healthcare workers was particularly poignant, as Charles spoke about the angels and scrubs who bring not just medical expertise but human compassion to those facing their greatest fears. Anyone who knew about Catherine's treatment would understand that this was informed by personal gratitude, but the language was universal enough to honor all healthcare workers and speak to anyone who had experienced serious illness. As the speech moved toward its conclusion, Charles included a passage about the quiet heroes in our own families, whose strength we may take for granted until circumstances reveal the depth of their courage. This was perhaps the most direct tribute to Catherine while still maintaining appropriate discretion. The words could apply to any family, but they carried special resonance for anyone familiar with how Catherine had handled her diagnosis and treatment. The final element of the visual tribute came as Charles delivered his concluding Christmas wishes. The camera pulled back slightly to show more of the room, revealing the full context of the carefully chosen elements. The family photographs, the meaningful ornaments, the crystal vase catching the light, all of it came together to create a portrait of royal family life that felt both grand and intimate, formal and deeply personal. Charles ended his address with words that had particular significance for anyone who had watched Catherine's journey through the year. Let us remember that our greatest strength often emerges not from avoiding life's challenges, but from meeting them with dignity, surrounding ourselves with love, and continuing to serve others even when our own path seems uncertain. In this Christmas season, may we all find the light that helps us shine more brightly for those who need our support. As the filming concluded, Charles felt a deep satisfaction. He had achieved exactly what he had hoped, creating a Christmas address that honored Catherine's remarkable year while speaking to universal human experiences of resilience, family love, and the power of quiet courage. The tribute was there for those who knew how to read it, but the message itself would resonate with anyone who had faced difficult times and found strength in family support. The broadcast would air in 2 days, carrying its layers of meaning to audiences around the world, each viewer taking from it what they needed to hear about hope, resilience, and the enduring power of love to sustain us through our most challenging moments. Christmas Day morning arrived with the kind of perfect winter weather that seemed designed for royal occasions. Across the United Kingdom and throughout the Commonwealth nations, families were gathering for their traditional Christmas celebrations, and at exactly 3 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, millions of television screens would illuminate with King Charles III's fourth Christmas address. At Sandringham House in Norfolk, the extended royal family was preparing for their own Christmas traditions. Catherine, radiant in a deep burgundy dress that highlighted her renewed vitality, was helping her children unwrap presents in the morning room while William organized the traditional pre-lunch walk that would take them to St. Mary Magdalene Church for Christmas service. Catherine had no idea that in a few hours, her father-in-law would deliver a Christmas message that served as an elaborate tribute to her strength and resilience over the past year. She was focused entirely on creating magical Christmas memories for her children, reveling in the simple joy of being present and healthy for every moment of the celebration. Prince George, now 11 and increasingly aware of royal protocols, was examining a new camera he had received, eager to document the family's Christmas Day activities. Princess Charlotte, 9 and ever the organizer, was making sure that everyone's gifts were properly sorted and that little Prince Louis, 6 and full of Christmas morning energy, didn't accidentally scatter wrapping paper throughout the historic house. Meanwhile, across the nation and Commonwealth, broadcasting technicians were making final preparations to transmit the King's message to an estimated audience of over 100 million people worldwide. The weight of this annual tradition, dating back to King George V's first Christmas broadcast in 1932, rested heavily on everyone involved in bringing the message to global audiences. At the BBC headquarters in London, the production team was reviewing the technical aspects of the broadcast one final time. The quality of the filming at Windsor Castle had been exceptional, with every visual element perfectly positioned to support the speech's carefully layered meaning. Director Sarah Mitchell, who had overseen royal broadcasts for over 15 years, noted the unusual attention to symbolic detail in this year's production. As afternoon approached, families across Britain began gathering around television sets, tablets, and phones to participate in one of the few remaining shared national experiences. In living rooms from Cornwall to Scotland, in military bases around the world where British forces were stationed, and in Commonwealth nations from Australia to Canada, people prepared to listen to their King's Christmas message. Catherine and her family had settled into the comfortable drawing room at Sandringham, the children finally calm after the excitement of Christmas morning present opening. William sat beside Catherine on the sofa, with Prince Louis nestled between them and the older children seated on the floor nearby. The room felt warm and intimate, a stark contrast to the formal grandeur where Charles would be appearing on their television screen. As the broadcast began, Catherine watched with the interested but relaxed attention of someone who had heard many royal Christmas addresses over the years. The opening was traditional and comforting, with Charles looking dignified but approachable in the familiar setting of Windsor Castle's white drawing room. Catherine appreciated how her father-in-law had grown into the role of monarch, bringing his own warmth and environmental passion to a position that had seemed daunting when he first inherited it. But, as the speech progressed, Catherine began to notice elements that felt unusually personal. When Charles spoke about those who face private battles with public grace, she felt William's hand find hers, a gentle squeeze that suggested he was hearing something in his father's words that resonated with their own recent experiences. The camera work was subtly magnificent, revealing background elements that seemed carefully chosen rather than merely decorative. When the lens caught the family photographs, Catherine recognized images from their own collection, moments from their wedding, family holidays, and informal gatherings that had been meaningful to the family but had never been part of official royal documentation. Prince George, ever observant, was the first to comment. "Grandpa has our Christmas ornaments on his tree," he said, pointing to the handmade decorations that the children had created during Catherine's treatment period. "Those are the ones we made when Mama was sick." Catherine's breath caught slightly as she began to understand what she was witnessing. The ornaments, the photographs, even the specific language Charles was using, it was all connected. This wasn't just a Christmas address, it was something much more personal and profound. As Charles spoke about hope that refracts and multiplies, creating light even in our darkest moments, the camera captured the crystal vase that Catherine remembered giving to a children's hospital charity, watching as the winter sunlight created rainbow patterns across the wall behind the king. The symbolism was beautiful and unmistakable to anyone who understood its significance. William's arm had moved around Catherine's shoulders, and she could feel his emotional response to what they were witnessing. Their children, initially more interested in their new toys, were now paying attention to the screen, sensing that this broadcast held special meaning for their family. The passage about healthcare workers brought tears to Catherine's eyes. Charles's words about angels and scrubs who bring not just medical expertise but human compassion clearly came from personal experience and gratitude. She remembered the king's own cancer treatment earlier in the year and understood that this tribute to medical professionals spoke from both their experiences. As the address continued, Catherine realized that Charles had managed to tell the story of her year without ever mentioning her by name or explicitly referencing her illness. Every theme, every visual element, every carefully chosen phrase seemed to reflect the journey she had traveled from diagnosis through treatment to recovery, while simultaneously speaking to universal human experiences of resilience and hope. The moment that moved her most deeply came when Charles spoke about the quiet heroes in our own families, whose strength we may take for granted until circumstances reveal the depth of their courage. The words were delivered with such sincerity and obvious personal meaning that Catherine understood this was a father-in-law speaking directly to his daughter-in-law, expressing pride and gratitude in the only way royal protocol would allow. Princess Charlotte, always intuitive about emotions, had moved closer to her mother during the broadcast. "Mama," she whispered, "I think Grandpa is talking about you." Catherine felt overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness and artistry of what Charles had created. He had transformed his Christmas address into an elaborate love letter to her strength and resilience, while simultaneously creating a message that would inspire millions of people facing their own challenges. It was royal communication at its most sophisticated level, deeply personal yet universally meaningful. As the broadcast reached its conclusion, with Charles's words about finding light to help others shine more brightly, Catherine understood that she was witnessing something unprecedented in royal history. Never before had a monarch used the Christmas address to pay such an elaborate and loving tribute to a family member, all while maintaining the dignity and universal appeal expected of the annual message. William was openly emotional now, his pride in his father's gesture evident. The children were asking questions about why the broadcast seemed so special to their parents, beginning to understand that they had witnessed something significant even if they couldn't fully grasp its complexity. When the broadcast ended and the screen returned to normal Christmas Day programming, the family sat in thoughtful silence for a moment. Catherine felt a deep sense of gratitude not just for the tribute itself, but for the way Charles had found to honor her experience while creating something that would bring comfort and inspiration to countless others facing similar challenges. The telephone began ringing almost immediately, family members, friends, and palace staff calling to discuss what they had just witnessed. But, for Catherine, the most meaningful response was sitting right beside her. William's eyes were bright with unshed tears as he whispered, "Father did that for you. He turned his Christmas message into a tribute to your courage." Catherine understood now that the broadcast would be remembered not just as King Charles III's fourth Christmas address, but as one of the most sophisticated and moving pieces of royal communication ever created. Through careful symbolism, thoughtful language, and exquisite attention to detail, Charles had managed to honor her journey while creating a message of hope that would resonate with audiences long after Christmas Day had passed. As evening fell on Christmas Day and the royal family gathered for their traditional dinner, Catherine felt a profound sense of belonging and appreciation for the institution she had married into and the family that had supported her through the most challenging year of her life. The Christmas address had been Charles's gift to her, but, through it, he had given something precious to millions of people around the world who needed to hear that courage, love, and hope could triumph over even the darkest circumstances. In the weeks following Christmas Day 2024, the true impact of King Charles III's carefully crafted tribute began to unfold in ways that surprised even the palace communications team. What had started as a personal homage to Catherine's courage had evolved into something far more significant, a new template for how modern monarchy could communicate complex emotions while maintaining appropriate dignity and universal appeal. Royal biographer Victoria Matthews was among the first to recognize the sophisticated artistry of what Charles had accomplished. Writing in her Boxing Day column for The Times, she observed, "His Majesty has demonstrated that royal communication can be both deeply personal and broadly inspirational. This Christmas address will be studied for years as a masterpiece of symbolic storytelling that honors individual courage while speaking to universal human experiences." The analysis pieces that appeared in newspapers and royal websites throughout the following week revealed the extraordinary attention to detail that had gone into every aspect of the broadcast. Royal photographers noted how the placement of family photos had been positioned to catch natural light at specific moments during the speech. Interior design experts marveled at the way meaningful objects had been incorporated into the room's decoration without appearing staged or obvious. Most importantly, the public response demonstrated how effectively Charles had achieved his dual purpose. Letters and emails poured into Buckingham Palace from viewers who had been moved by the speech's themes of quiet courage and family resilience, often without realizing they had witnessed an elaborate tribute to a specific person. Cancer support charities reported increased contact from people inspired by the message about finding hope during medical challenges. Catherine herself spent the days after Christmas reading through some of the public responses that palace staff had compiled for her. She was particularly moved by a letter from a young mother in Scotland who wrote, "The King's words about quiet heroes in our families helped me understand that my husband's strength during my cancer treatment was exactly the kind of courage His Majesty was celebrating. It made me see our experience differently, not as something we survived, but as something that revealed the best in our family." Another letter, from a teenage boy whose grandmother was undergoing chemotherapy, thanked the King for helping him understand that courage wasn't about being fearless, but about continuing to care for others even when afraid. "My gran keeps making Sunday dinner for all of us even though she's tired from her treatments," he wrote. "Now I understand that's the kind of hero the King was talking about." These responses confirmed what Catherine had sensed while watching the broadcast, that Charles had managed to honor her specific experience while creating a message that would resonate with anyone facing challenges that tested their resilience and faith in better days ahead. The international response was equally significant. Commonwealth prime ministers and governors-general noted how the broadcast had demonstrated the monarchy's continued relevance in addressing contemporary human experiences. The Canadian Prime Minister commented that the speech had shown how traditional institutions could evolve to meet modern emotional needs without losing their essential dignity and purpose. Within the royal family, the Christmas address had created a new depth of understanding and appreciation. William spoke privately to friends about how moved he had been by his father's gesture, noting that it represented a level of emotional sophistication that few people outside the family would fully appreciate. The fact that Charles had found a way to express deep familial love while maintaining royal protocol demonstrated his growth as both a monarch and a father-in-law. The children, too, had been affected by witnessing their grandfather's tribute to their mother. Prince George, with his developing understanding of royal responsibilities, began asking more thoughtful questions about how public duty and private emotion could work together. Princess Charlotte, always empathetic, seemed to grasp intuitively that the broadcast had been special, often mentioning how proud she felt when she saw their homemade ornaments on Grandpa's Christmas tree. For Catherine herself, the weeks after Christmas brought a new understanding of her role within the royal family and the monarchy as a whole. She had always approached her duties with dedication and genuine care for the causes she supported, but Charles's tribute helped her see how her personal experience of facing and overcoming challenges had become part of her qualifications for royal service. During a private lunch with Charles in early January 2025, Catherine finally had the opportunity to thank him directly for the Christmas address. They met at Clarence House, in the informal dining room where family conversations had taken place for generations. "I hope you don't mind that I used your story as inspiration," Charles said, settling into his chair with the slight awkwardness that sometimes accompanied his most heartfelt conversations. "But, watching how you handled this year, the grace you showed, the way you kept focusing on others even while dealing with your own challenges, it seemed like exactly what people needed to hear about." Catherine's response was characteristically thoughtful. "What moved me most was that you found a way to make it about everyone facing difficult times, not just about me. That's what made it so powerful. People could see their own experiences reflected in the message." Their conversation revealed how the Christmas address had achieved something unprecedented in royal communication. By using one person's specific experience as inspiration for universal themes, Charles had created a template for how the monarchy could remain relevant and emotionally resonant in an age that demanded both authenticity and relatability from public figures. The success of the approach also influenced how other royal family members began thinking about their own public communications. William and Catherine's subsequent public appearances and speeches showed a new confidence in weaving personal insights into their public messaging, always maintaining appropriate boundaries while allowing their genuine experiences to inform their service to others. The palace communications team began studying the Christmas address as a case study in effective royal messaging. The careful balance of personal and universal, the sophisticated use of visual symbolism, and the successful integration of contemporary emotional needs with traditional royal dignity became reference points for future broadcasts and public appearances. Royal historians noted that the 2024 Christmas address had created a new category in the evolution of royal communication. Previous monarchs had occasionally referenced personal experiences in their public statements, but never with such elaborate artistry and emotional sophistication. Charles had proven that the ancient institution of monarchy could adapt to express complex contemporary emotions while maintaining its essential character and broad appeal. As 2025 progressed, Catherine continued to receive letters and messages from people who had been inspired by the themes of the Christmas address, often without initially realizing the personal story that had inspired Charles's words. Cancer support organizations asked her to become involved in new initiatives based on the response to the broadcast's message about quiet courage and family resilience. The lasting impact of Charles's tribute extended beyond individual inspiration to influence how the royal family approached their public roles. The success of weaving personal experience into universal messaging encouraged a more emotionally authentic approach to royal communication, while still maintaining the dignity and broad appeal essential to the monarchy's function. Perhaps most significantly, the Christmas address had demonstrated how the royal family could honor and support each other while serving their public purpose. Charles's elaborate tribute to Catherine showed that the monarchy's strength lay not just in individual dedication to duty, but in the family's capacity to recognize, celebrate, and learn from each other's courage and resilience. As the first anniversary of the broadcast approached in late 2025, Catherine reflected on how that Christmas Day had marked not just her father-in-law's tribute to her difficult year, but the beginning of a new chapter in her understanding of royal service. The experience of being honored through such sophisticated royal communication had shown her how personal struggles could become sources of strength not just for individuals and families, but for entire nations seeking examples of grace under pressure. The 2024 Christmas address would be remembered as the moment when King Charles III demonstrated that the monarchy's greatest power lay in its ability to transform personal experience into universal inspiration, proving that even the most ancient institutions could evolve to meet contemporary human needs while maintaining their essential dignity and purpose. Through his tribute to Catherine's quiet courage, Charles had created something that would resonate far beyond Christmas Day 2024, establishing a new standard for how royal families could honor each other while serving the broader human family with wisdom, compassion, and authentic hope.